If someone were to come up to you and ask you why you celebrate Easter, what would you say? Could you explain it clearly? Well, one verse, a short little verse that would be easy to memorize to help us explain it to people who may ask is Romans 4, verse 25. Speaking of Jesus, Paul writes, who was delivered up for our trespasses and raised up for our justification. In this one small verse, Paul gives us a powerful description of what Jesus has done for us and why celebrating and remembering it is so essential to our faith. The first, what we see here is that he was delivered up for our trespasses. We recognize that all of us have sinned. We had not only sinned purposefully, but we are sinners. We are driven to sin. We remember that God is perfectly righteous and justice, so the penalty for our sin had to be paid for. Thus, Jesus was delivered up for our trespasses. And as he was delivered up, he bore the wrath of God on himself. He bore hell on our behalf. But the second part of the verse is that he was raised up for our justification. It's important, one thing, to remember that Jesus did die for our sins, but it's also equally important to remember that he was raised up. And he was raised by the Father. And in doing so, the Father vindicated Jesus and nullified that sentence of condemnation that was on all of us. Because as Jesus was raised from the dead and vindicated, he was declared as righteous. Now here is the really cool part that we all need to remember. So as we come to Jesus, as we come to him in faith, we not only recognize our need for forgiveness of sins and that our sins need to be paid for, but we recognize that Jesus has paid the penalty for our sins. And then we recognize that Jesus, the perfectly righteous one, remember, Jesus didn't break any laws. He obeyed God perfectly, but he took the wrath of God in our place. That because Jesus was sinless, he died a sinless death, and the sentence was vindicated, nullified by the Father. Then we, as we look to him as the righteous one, we receive his righteousness by faith. And that means that when the Father looks down on us, he sees the righteous robes of Jesus that covers us. Regardless of what we struggle with, regardless of what sins we face, Jesus paid the price for all those sins. And Jesus was raised by the Father, and we, as we come to him in faith, as we rest in him in faith, we too receive the righteousness of Jesus Christ. So as we move into this Easter, I encourage you to celebrate it joyfully, remembering that Jesus was delivered up for your trespasses, and he was raised up for your justification. That is really, really good news. I'm Bob Orner, and I'd like you to think about that.